Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. My name is Theo, and I'm a graduate in engineering. In this video, we're going to practice the core Python basics through simple exercises. The goal is not to introduce new theory, but to apply what we've already learned and build confidence with Python. By the end of this video, you should feel more comfortable writing and understanding basic Python code. If you find this video helpful, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment. Let's get started. Before we start the exercises, let's do a quick theoretical recap. In Python, code is executed line by line, from top to bottom. This means the order of your code always matters. We use the print function to display information on the screen, which is very useful to understand what a program is doing. Comments start with the hash symbol. They are completely ignored by Python and are only there to explain the code for humans. Variables are used to store values in memory, and we assign values using the equals sign. In Python, this equals sign means assignment, not equality. Every value in Python has a type. The most common basic types are integers, floats, strings, booleans, and none. Python can perform basic mathematical operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, following standard mathematical rules. One important thing to remember is that division always returns a float. Strings are used to represent text. They are written inside quotes, support concatenation with the plus operator, repetition with the star operator, and we can measure their length using the len function. String indexing starts at 0. The input function allows the user to enter data, but it always returns a string, even when a user types a number. Because of that, we often need type conversion. We use int and float for numbers, str for text, and bool for logical values. With all of that in mind, we're now ready to move on to the exercises and apply these concepts in practice. Let's start with the first exercise. The goal here is very simple. We want to display some basic information using the print function. I'll start with the first line. I use print to display my name. Since my name is text, I write it inside quotes. When I run this line, Python prints the text on the screen. On the next line, I want to print my age. On the last line, I want to print the result of a calculation. Instead of computing it myself, I let Python do the work. I write the expression inside print, and Python evaluates it first, then prints the result. When I run the program, Python executes the code line by line, from top to bottom. First, it prints the name, then the age, and finally the result of the calculation. This exercise shows that print can display text, numbers, and the result of expressions, all in a very simple way. Let's move on to the second exercise. Here, the goal is to use variables and perform basic operations with them. I'll start by creating the first variable. I store the value 10 in a variable called a. On the next line, I create a second variable called b, and I store the value 5 inside it. On this line, I print the sum of a and b. On the next line, I print the product of a and b. Python takes the values, multiplies them, and displays the result. Finally, I print the division of a by b. When I run the program, Python executes everything from top to bottom, using the values stored in the variables to compute each result. Let's move on to the third exercise, this time working with strings. I'll start by creating a variable called word. I store the text Python inside it. Since this is text, it must be written inside quotes. On the next line, I print the value of the variable. Python simply displays the word stored in memory. Then, I want to print the length of the word. I use the len function, which counts how many characters the string contains, and Python prints the result. Now, I want to access individual characters. Remember that string indexing starts at 0. On this line, I print the character at index 0, which is the first character of the word. Finally, I print the last character of the word. Instead of counting indexes manually, I use -1. When I run the program, Python executes each line from top to bottom, printing the word, its length, the first character, and the last character. Let's move on to the fourth exercise. In this exercise, we're going to use user input to make the program interactive. I'll start with the first line. I use the input function to ask the user for their first name. The message inside the parentheses is displayed on the screen, and the program pauses until the user types something. The value entered by the user is stored in a variable called first_name. On the next line, I do the same thing for the city. I ask the user where they live, and I store the result in a variable called city. Now that I have both pieces of information, I want to print a sentence using them. On this line, I use print and pass several elements separated by commas. Python automatically adds spaces between them and prints a clean sentence that includes both user inputs. When I run the program, Python executes everything from top to bottom. It first waits for the user to enter their name, then their city, and finally prints a sentence combining both values. Let's move on to the fifth exercise. In this exercise, we're going to ask the user for a number and then perform a calculation with it. I'll start by asking the user for their age using the input function. The message is displayed on the screen, and the program waits until the user enters a value. At this point, the value is still stored as a string. On the next line, I convert the input to an integer using the int function. This step is very important because without it, we wouldn't be able to perform numerical operations. Now that the age is stored as an integer, I can safely do calculations with it. On this line, I print the age next year by adding 1 to the current value. When I run the program, Python executes each line from top to bottom. It first waits for the user input, then converts it, and finally prints the calculated result. Let's move on to the sixth exercise. In this exercise, we're going to combine user input, type conversion, and calculations. I'll start by asking the user for the first number using the input function. The program pauses and waits until the user enters a value, which is stored as a string in the variable number 1. On the next line, I ask the user for the second number and store it in another variable called number 2. At this stage, both values are still strings. Now, before doing any calculations, I need to convert both inputs to numbers. I use the float function to convert number 1 to a decimal number, and I do the same for number 2. Once both values are floats, I can safely perform mathematical operations. On this line, I print the sum of the two numbers by adding them together. Finally, I print the average of the two numbers. I add them first, then divide the result by 2. When I run the program, Python executes the code from top to bottom. It collects the inputs, converts them, and then prints the calculated results. Let's move on to the final exercise. This exercise combines several concepts we've already seen: user input, variables, type conversion, calculations, and output. I'll start by asking the user for their name using the input function. The program waits for the user to enter their name, and the value is stored as a string in the variable name. On the next line, I ask the user for their year of birth. Once again, the input is stored as a string in the variable birth_year. Before doing any calculations, I need to convert the year of birth to an integer. I use the int function so Python can treat it as a number. Now that the value is an integer, I can compute the age. I subtract the birth year from the year 2025 and store the result in a variable called age. Finally, I print a clear sentence using all the values we've computed. I pass several elements to print, and Python automatically formats the output with spaces. When I run the program, Python executes everything from top to bottom. It collects the inputs, converts the data, performs the calculation, and displays the final result in a readable sentence. This exercise is a good example of how simple building blocks can be combined to create a complete and useful program. That brings us to the end of this video. You've practiced the core Python basics and learned how code runs step by step. The goal isn't memorizing syntax, but understanding how simple instructions work together. Try redoing and modifying the exercises on your own. That's how you really learn. All the code is available on my GitHub, linked in the description. If this video helped you, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.